Hello and welcome back to the Scenario 7 podcast. Again, Sam is still on holiday, loving his time still in France, away from us. I'm sure he's loving life. Us three are still stuck in England. Not as hot anymore, it is now raining, but I'm still glad to be at home and be able to give you some content. Obviously, this week it is now the Hungarian Grand Prix, and today I'm not just joined by one person, I am joined by two lovely guests, Matt and Joe. Joe, how are you first?
I'm doing good, Josh. How are you?
I'm not too bad, thank you for asking. Matt, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm all good, thank you, Josh. Nice to see you as a host. So far, you've been doing really well. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thanks for the comment. I'm not so sure about my first time, but we'll forget about that and move on about that one. But yeah, let's jump straight into this preview for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And as always, we'll start off with the latest F1 news from this week. Starting off, Lewis Hamilton has recently said that he expects Max Verstappen to cruise to his second world championship, and he described the Red Bull's driver path to probable glory as smooth sailing. It has seemed that way to be pretty smooth sailing for Max, but you never know with Ferrari. They may put it out of the bag and actually start competing towards the end of the season. Another bit of news, sticking with the Red Bull team, is Christian Horner. He has demanded the FIA to investigate the virtual safety car restarts after George Russell secured a podium at the French Grand Prix. The Red Bull boss revealed Perez did not get the correct virtual safety data in his car, which is used to tell a driver to slow down and speed up. This resulted in him losing the position to George Russell towards the end of the Grand Prix. And finally, another bit of news for you is the Williams boss, Jost Capito, discusses the shock contender for the 2023 Williams seat. The team principal is sport for choice, with more driver options than he has seats available. Of course, the two drivers in the car this year of Alex Albon and Nicholas Latifi are in the mix, but another shock driver has entered the frame. That is the rising Formula 2 talent of Logan Sargent. When Jost Capito was asked about the American driver's emergence, he said that it would be a great headache of his to decide who to pick out of the three drivers and other possible drivers that he has to pull from. So, Matt, Joe, what were your thoughts on these news for this week?
Well, I guess I'll go first. Yeah, as in going on to probably what Hamilton said, it's getting quite hard to probably disagree with what he's saying, as in obviously he's been in that position and knows the scenario. The fact is that Max just needs to probably win one race and then just come second and then basically cruise to the world title. There is a scenario where Max DNFs 3 races at some point and Charles Leclerc just needs to capitalize on it. I think it'll be at this stage of the season quite a shock if Max doesn't win the world title and Leclerc. But I think what will probably, the only way that can probably hinder Verstappen is if Mercedes get in the mix and it ends up being a 6-way fight for the title. So yeah, and then the second one with the VSC, it's perfectly fine. It's just classic corner moaning, like he does, which is in his right in order to protect his driver. But again, it's just him moaning. And then what was the third one?
The Williams team principal having a headache. Sergeant.
Yeah, I don't really know. I haven't seen much of F2. I like Paul Chair, but obviously he's an Alfa Romeo driver. Would like to see Nick de Vries in that seat. So yeah, I think Williams have got a choice to either go for the money or the talent. And I think for Williams to actually develop as a team, they need to go for the talent, and that will probably be either Nick de Vries or somewhere. I think Logan Sargent is an academy driver, so that could be an option.
On your questions, I think Verstappen, as you've already explained, Joey, kind of only needs like a few more wins and a few more podiums. yeah, it's looking pretty smooth and sailing for him at the moment. And yeah, Hamilton's been in so many championship battles. He does know what he's talking about. Onto the VSC incident. It was very weird watching it. I remember saying, "Why has the VSC been ending for about half a lap?" And yeah, I don't know. I can understand why drivers are getting annoyed about it because it was very bizarre. Onto the Williams headache of potential drivers. It's an interesting one because I feel like rookies in F1, you don't know what you're quite going to get with them. It's always a bit of a stab in the dark. But yeah, I think there's better drivers out there than F2 drivers and more experienced drivers that can ultimately help develop the car, get more performance out of the car than people like in F2. So yeah, they're my thoughts.
Yeah, like you both said, picking a driver or picking your drivers is quite difficult because there's such a long list you can choose from so many different areas of motorsport. It must be a headache for all principals, but I'm sure they'll make the right decision eventually before next season. But moving on to the actual Hungarian Grand Prix itself, we're going to talk about the track. So the Hungarian GP is held at the Hungaroring circuit, which is located just outside of Budapest. It has hosted the FIA Formula One GP since 1986, all because of a friend of Bernie Ecclestone, who persuaded him to race in Hungary instead of the USSR, which is now known as of course, Russia. The circuit is 4.3 kilometers long with 14 corners. And as Matt pointed out to me earlier, I believe he said it has 5 left-handed corners and the 9 to the right. It also has 2 DRS zones, which are both located very close to each other. The first being on the home straight, and the second coming just after turn 1 before taking a 180-degree turn around turn 2. And the current lap record is held by Max Verstappen when he set a time of 1 minute 17.1 in 2019. So Joe, what are your thoughts on the Hungaroring circuit?
I think it's quite hard to tell with these new generation of cars, because for me the circuit was either tire deg being quite high, making it interesting, either being a 1-stop or a 2-stop, or it's to do with the weather. If you take that aspects out of it, which has happened probably, I don't know, 4 out of the last 10 races, I would say it's quite a boring circuit in terms of the fact you can't really overtake. It's very much like Monaco with barriers a bit more wider. But yeah, it's a good track in the sense of it's got as you don't know what's going to happen when you turn up in terms of tire wear or just the weather in general. But again, if you take that out of consideration and look at some of the races where there has just been sunshine, it's been quite boring. But just looking at the weather, it looks like it could potentially rain, so it could be an interesting one.
Yeah, I'll say I've been to this track in 2018, so I can kind of give a wider perspective. And yeah, it's very unlike France. France, you have loads of runoff in your binoculars to see the cars, whereas Hungary is at one of those classic tracks that you've already explained. It's been on the calendar for many years, and you have a brilliant view of loads of the track. In terms of racing, it is difficult to overtake, but there's been so many prime examples of brilliant races. Last year's race was brilliant. 2014 was a brilliant race. If you want to go and watch that back, it was really entertaining. And yeah, the weather always spices up this track. Last year, obviously, 2018 qualifying was brilliant to watch, especially in the grandstands. Yeah, I also very much like this track. You can tell by the t-shirt as well. So yeah, they're my thoughts.
Yeah, like you both said, you both mentioned the weather there, and I think around this track in particular, it does pay a massive difference of how entertaining the race can be in Hungary. So let's hope for some entertaining race this weekend, whether it's dry or wet, but I'm sure it'll be good either way. And like you mentioned there, Matt, you spoke about last year's race, which is what we're going to talk about now. And for those who don't remember, I'm sure you all remember because it was quite one of those spectacular races. I'll just quickly run through what happened in last year's race. So obviously, Alpine's Esteban Ocon claimed his maiden Formula One victory in what was without a doubt one of the most thrilling Hungarian Grand Prix of all time. He finished ahead of Aston Martin's Sebastian Vettel, while Lewis Hamilton recovered from being at last at one point to claim P3. Obviously, he had that weird moment when he was the only one on the grid for a restart whilst everyone else pitted. Max Verstappen could only take 10th after lap 1 contact in a crash that triggered a red flag. And you probably heard me say about Sebastian Vettel finishing P2. However, there was drama after the race as Vettel was disqualified when race officials could not extract the necessary fuel sample from his car. This meant that Carlos Sainz was promoted to the podium and Hamilton then finished second instead of third. And obviously, the rest of the field moved up one spot each as well. Like I mentioned, it was a wild and wet start to the Hungarian Grand Prix, which saw 5 drivers eliminated on the first lap as Valtteri Bottas locked up and pretty much wiped out most of the grid. He went straight into the back of Lando Norris and Sergio Perez, and then he also then went into his teammate Verstappen, whilst Lance Stroll further behind also locked up and hit Charles Leclerc, who then spun around Daniel Ricciardo. And as a result of this chaos, Bottas himself, plus Perez, Norris, Stroll, and Leclerc were all forced into retirement as there was a red flag afterwards. And then furthermore, all this drama benefited Williams massively as they were able to claim their first points since 2019 German Grand Prix, with both of their drivers finishing in the top 10. And I'll just quickly run through the finishing order for the race as it was followed. So obviously Ocon was P1, Hamilton P2, Sainz P3, Alonso P4, Gasly P5, Tsunoda P6, Latifi P7, Russell P8. That was quite interesting how Latifi beat his teammate. And then Verstappen P9, Raikkonen P10, Ricciardo P11, Schumacher P12, and Giovinazzi was the only other finisher in P13. Everyone else was retired. So Joe and Matt, what were your memories from last year's race? I'm sure it might be the same, but hopefully you might have something different to each other.
Well, I think I'm going to go for probably the start. I think it was quite a straw. I never seen anything like it. Well, the most interesting thing is if obviously the rule is you can't go into the pits. You can't have any like radio comms on the outlap. So it'd be interesting if there was some rule breaking, possibly most of the field, so they obviously couldn't penalise everybody. But yeah, it was the most weird sight just seeing Lewis Hamilton just line up by himself and everybody in the pits. But yeah, and then I think that made the race entertaining, going on to what obviously happened last year's race, and then seeing Lewis Hamilton fight his way through the field was very good and very exciting. Obviously, I wanted him to win it, so in order to get more championship points. But yeah, it was very, very strange watching the start of the race.
Yeah, a lot happened in that race. I'll just fill in a few things. Verstappen had half of his car basically destroyed, so his left-hand side barge board got completely wiped out, and he had to somehow compete a whole race with half of his car missing. I remember his battle with Mick Schumacher was really entertaining. Loads of drivers managed to survive the lap 1 chaos, and Nicholas Latifi was one of them. Onto my highlight of last year, it has to be Lewis Hamilton lining up on the grid, being the only one on the intermediate tyres. Watching it live, it was really funny because I remember Russell was on the team radio just beforehand saying, "Oh, the pits is going to be really busy. Everyone's going to pit," and then seeing Ocon file into the pits, then Hamilton continue whilst the track was basically bone dry. And yeah, seeing those 5 red lights go out and just Hamilton on the grids. I think as soon as he went off, he was already trying to get heat into his tyres. And I can imagine the safety car, because the safety car always has to be on the race start, sitting there just saying, who's this plonk who's on the grid whilst everyone else is pitted. And yeah, the pits was chaos. I think it was Mazepin got his right front tyre destroyed when someone chopped him off. You had Russell skipping the queue and like, what do I do here? And he ended up skipping the queue and ended up being P2 before having to give all the places back. Yeah, it was a brilliant race, but that was my highlight from last year.
Yeah, there were plenty of weird and wacky moments during that race last year. But I'd probably say my favourite moment of ones you haven't said was Fernando's defence of Lewis Hamilton to help Ocon win his maiden race, obviously his teammate. We all know how good of a driver Fernando is, and the way he held off Hamilton for so long, it was just impressive to watch, and it just added to the drama of the race from last year. But moving on from your memories and from last year's race, we're going to talk about our predictions and our points table. So obviously, Matt, you didn't predict the last race, but me and Joe both did. So there have been some slight changes to the table this week. I think I ran through in the review how many points me and Joe got from last week. So I'll just run through the table as it is now. So Matt, you are still top with an average of 3.2. And I have managed to climb my way up into second place with an average of 3. I'm coming for you, Matt. I'm on my way. And then Sam has dropped down to P3 with an average of 2.6. Joe, you stayed 4th, but you have gained a higher average. You are now an average of 1.9 instead of 1.8. And Rob is still in 5th and final place with 0.5, as he's only been here twice. So we'll see if he can come back again and hopefully improve his points total. But that's it for the points table. We're now going to give our predictions for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And just quickly, if you don't remember, that includes the first accident, the first safety car / red flag, and that does include a virtual safety car, just to get all the confusion out of the way. A first pit stop, a first blue flag, most overtakes, and who will finish on the podium. So Joe, what are your predictions for this week at Hungary?
First accident, obviously this is depending on if it's going to rain, because I don't think this will happen if it doesn't rain. But I am going to go for Joe, first accident. He's either going to cause the first accident or the safety car, but I've chosen the accident just because he did retire last time, and obviously still new to F1, still a bit of a rookie, and Hungary is one of those tracks you need to be very technical with. First safety car, I am going to choose Schumacher on lap 1. Again, just because it's wet, there might be, again, the chaos that happened last year with the fact is they can't see, and then you have to brake late in order to gain places. So then that's going to cause a pit stop for Vettel on lap 1. He's all on lap 1, just because Vettel might get caught up in it. And then blue flags, I've gone Latifi lap 32, just because at the moment he is the slowest driver on the grid, but is improving, so it could change and make them obviously hopefully make guessing the blue flag a lot difficult. So lap 32 for that. And then most overtakes, I have gone for Norris with 5.
Interesting. I'll go next. There's a few similarities, mainly being in the Tiffy and Joe 1U. But yeah, first accident, Stroll lap 1. Last year, he didn't even make turn 2. He just went straight on and wiped out Leclerc. So maybe it'll be the same this year. First VSC/safety car/red flag. I've gone with Wanyu Zhou, lap 1. He's a rookie, so I kind of expect a few mistakes this weekend from him. First pit stop, Yuki Tsunoda, lap 1. Tsunoda last race at France had incident with Ocon, so maybe something similar happened this weekend. First blue flag, very common theme of Latifi, and I've also gone with Latifi, lap 20. Depending on if cars get front wing damage and punctures, someone might get lapped quite quickly, so it's a short track. Most overtakes, I've gone with Kevin Magnussen with 5, after taking loads of new engine components at France. I feel like he'd be really quick compared to some of the people around him, and I think he'll get 5 overtakes.
Both quite similar there, and obviously sticking with the lap 1 theme. I've heard though, and I have slightly changed mine just so we can have something different instead of having 3 similar predictions. But I am sticking with the theme of lap 1 for both the first accident and the safety car, because that's just when the majority of these incidents will take place. So first accident, I've gone with Lance Stroll, like you, Matt, also on lap 1, just because he's not having the greatest of times in that Aston Martin, and obviously what he did last year, there could be a repeat of it again. First safety car / virtual safety car / red flag, I've gone with Alex Albon, just to keep my options open and not go with the same people each week. I just feel like Williams will maybe be involved in something this weekend, and I wanted to choose a different Williams driver to Latifi, and so I've gone with Alex Albon on lap 1. And then first pit stop, I've gone with Schumacher on lap 19. So I've changed the lap from lap 1 just so I can keep my options open. I've gone with the similar reasons to Matt of picking up damage and being towards the back of the field. You might have to pit early on or something like that. And first blue flag, I've gone with Guanyu Zhou. Similarly to Schumacher, he might have picked up damage in some sort of chaos at the start, and he's fallen back behind everyone, and he's unfortunately been first to receive the blue flag, and that'll be on lap 25. And then most overtakes, I've chosen Pierre Gasly with 4. Just a random pick, that one. This one is impossible to pick, so I've just chosen a random driver and a random number. So that is the predictions. Moving on to the top 3 for the podium. I don't think we said those. So Joe, who are you predicting to go on the podium this weekend?
Yeah, while you were talking, I was trying to find what update the Mercedes were going to bring. It looks like it's might be quite a big update, so I'm going to go quite bold here. I feel the Ferrari car is going to be good around here because of the fact is it's good on like long corners, and obviously basically Red Bull from last year just flipped around a bit. So yeah, I'm going to go Leclerc P1, Sainz P2, and then I think the Mercedes upgrades will help them out, and obviously the race pace has improved massively, so it's going to end up hopefully pushing themselves forward into the second half and obviously this race. So I'm going for Lewis Hamilton P3.
I agree with the majority of what Joe said regarding Ferrari having a lot more downforce. Ferrari's also taking loads of fresh engine components, so they're going to be particularly quick around this track compared to their rivals, which haven't taken any engine components. So yeah, very similar. Only difference is P3. But yeah, first I think it will be Leclerc, second Sainz, and third Verstappen.
Okay, very interesting. I agree with you both. I think the Ferrari is going to be the better package out of the weekend. But I was tossing and turning on who to put where on the podium and whether to include 3 different teams or have just 2. And I have actually gone for 3 different teams on the podium. I'll start with the theme of Leclerc winning the race. I think he'll want to bounce back from the mistake he made in France. And like we've all said, the Ferrari package is looking quick and strong for this weekend with the downforce that it has. And then I've also gone for Verstappen to finish second, just because it's Max and he's in form. He doesn't seem to DNF that much, or he doesn't seem to go that far down in the points, even when he doesn't win. So I've stuck with him in P2. And then obviously, like I said, a different team, and I've gone with the Mercedes just because of the package that Joe said they're bringing. And I've gone with Lewis Hamilton because I still think he's the stronger driver of the 2, just because he's got more experience and he's been in that car for longer. I just think he'll be able to get the most out of the new package just quicker than George Russell. So I've gone for Leclerc, Verstappen, and then Hamilton. But that wraps up our podcast for this week. Thank you very much for listening and or watching, no matter wherever you are listening or watching from. Don't forget, we have a fantasy podcast out this week as well. I believe it'll be out on Friday. And obviously after the weekend, probably Monday or Tuesday, we will have a review of the Hungarian Grand Prix as well. Sam may be back for that one, not too sure, but don't get your hopes up just in case he isn't. But he might be back hosting the podcast instead of me, but we'll see. And also don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Those of you who have commented from last videos or podcasts, we will reply at some point, like I said last time. But we are quite slow at that, quite new at that, so we'll get replying at some point. But like I said, thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.